Over the Garden Wall was a short series with only one season, so how? How could it have been so great with only 10 episodes? First, some backstory. See, Over the Garden Wall arrived during the downfall and ending of many Cartoon Network legends, which left a hole in their lineup. In response, the network was looking for new ideas, as the ones they were pushing either failed or failed. There really wasn't a second option. Obviously, something different needed to be done. They couldn't keep repeating the same shows with different characters. Enters Patrick McHale. With the basis of what will become Over the Garden Wall, it's initially pitched, and initially it's set to be a feature-length film. However, after its development, the film is cut into episodes as Patrick felt it would be better if consumed in an episodic fashion. Finally, we arrive to its release date, November 3rd, 2014. My initial reaction to the show was unsettling and cold, with every frame having that blurred effect near the edges as if we aren't in our own world, but watching through the lens of an omniscient observer. Songs played are recognizable yet omniscious. Imagery portrays recognizable structures and people, but something isn't quite right. Familiar enough to bear it, but distant enough to make you crawl. However, there are comforting aspects of the show. For example, Jason Funderburker. There's the big brother, little brother dynamic we follow throughout the story. For me, it's reminiscent of learning to get along better with my brothers. For you, it may be learning to accept a half-sibling, or learning to take responsibility. Maybe it wasn't the characters at all, but the art style, as it was kind of classical with that modern flair. Whatever aspect of the show caught your eye, though, it comforted you and allowed you to take refuge in this unnerving cartoon. Unsettling enough to keep you away, but oddly comforting enough to keep you around. Colors in the show are calming. Reddish-brown for the leaves, brownish-gray for the trees and buildings, the sky a tinted yellow, a reflection of autumn. Progressively, as Wirt and Greg reach the end of their journey, these colors seem to shift from autumn's cool and cozy atmosphere to winter's lack of color, harsh whites, barren trees, absence of life. This change, however, is gradual. As the story seems to heat up, the surroundings cool down, until we reach an ultimate climax of the story. Characters are faced with the beast, all the while a vigorous snowstorm is afoot. The transition is beautiful, yet frightening. It's the show's ability to somehow invoke two opposite feelings simultaneously that sets it apart from others. Familiar enough to bear it, but distant enough to make you crawl, unsettling enough to keep you away, but oddly comforting enough to keep you around, disturbing enough to put you off, but unique enough to keep you interested, beautiful, yet frightening. Enough talking about everything around the show, though. Let's start talking about the show's actual plot. We follow stepbrothers Wirt and Greg on a journey home, but within the first few episodes we can tell they aren't in their world. Animals are talking, weird creatures exist, people are dressed in 18th century clothing, while Wirt mentions high school, which this world seems vacant of. One of the first characters we meet is the woodsman. His first appearance doesn't hold much weight, but as the story progresses he shows up more and more often. We eventually find out that the woodsman has to chop down these edelwood trees to keep this lantern burning. Now, stick with me here. This lantern is said to contain the soul of his daughter. If the lantern stops burning, his daughter would die. The main antagonist, however, is the beast. Not much is known about the beast other than he hunts for lost souls trying to find their way home, i.e. Wirt and Greg. After Greg is nearly turned into an edelwood tree, which is made from lost souls, yes, you heard that right, lost souls, we find out that the soul that is actually kept within the lantern is the beast's soul. And after the most badass scene where Wirt uses basic common sense to defeat the beast, they return home. But not their literal home. Instead, they return back to their world from what seems to be the afterlife. My brief explanation doesn't do it justice, but those are the basics. If I'm rating the show just based off its uniqueness alone, it's an instant 10 out of 10. The closest thing I could compare it to is a Tim Burton style of storytelling, but Even that isn't close enough to describe it. Over the Garden Wall was one of, if not the first out of Cartoon Network to include that type of existential topic. That being death, or purgatory, or some liminal transitional space between life or death. I'm not too sure. But it was a type of storytelling that hadn't been done up until that point, and even 9 years later, I haven't seen it be replicated properly. And if you have, comment, because I'm trying to see. Now I want to talk about that badass scene in particular. As a lost Greg lays stiff in the beginnings of an Edelwood tree, the Beast offers Wirt a deal that would save Greg from his impending doom. Wirt, not seeing another way out, begins to accept. But in a moment of reflection, he simply says,
"Wait, that's dumb."
Something no other show has done. Wirt didn't have an epic fight scene or have to make some outstanding sacrifice. He didn't give a speech that changed the villain. He handled it like a typical teenager, and that's what makes his character so relatable. You'd think that given the villain being basically beaten in 3 words, this scene must be anticlimactic. But it's not. The scene doesn't rely on an epic fight, but the culmination of the show's theme. Don't take things for as they appear, and in a moment that usually leaves the watcher screaming because the protagonist makes the wrong decision, for once we see a logical character. And as for Greg's character, what's not to enjoy? He's captivating, lovable, funny, but most importantly, he acts as Wirt's counterpart. While Wirt is pessimistic and a realist, Greg is optimistic and happy. If Greg's personality overshadows Wirt's, the duo makes bad decisions. If Wirt overshadows Greg, progress isn't made. It's that perfect balance that ultimately keeps the show moving in the right direction. And speaking of perfect, the Beast. What I believe to be the scariest character in all of Cartoon Network, second being the Lich, was truly a spectacle. The Beast wasn't watered down with meaningless scenes like villains that came before. He's not surrounded by jokes. He doesn't fail countless times. And setting up the Beast like this, you never lose respect for the villain. And he keeps that dangerous dark aura anytime he enters the frame. And it's something that was pioneered during this time period with shows like Over the Garden Wall. So, to end this like a school report that I'm rushing to finish, Over the Garden Wall had many aspects that made it a great show. One of which being its ability to invoke 2 opposite feelings concurrently. Another being its relatable and cutting-edge characters. And finally, its atmosphere that made the show feel nostalgic at every turn. Alrighty, and that is the Over the Garden Wall video. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, go ahead and leave me a comment. Let me know how I did. That's the number 2 in the series, I guess. I guess we start in another series. And yeah, so the last video did pretty well. For my standards, I guess. And well, I mean, I also enjoyed making it. So there you go. We got another one coming out. Don't know if it's gonna be a series, but I do enjoy making these. So don't be surprised if I drop more. With that being said, yabba da babba da boop, yabba da bee drop, yabba da babba da bee drop, yabba da babba bop. I'm heading out for the cause it's noon up. I don't know what time it is actually. Peace.